Good morning. I'm Rosemary Pena, president of the Black German Heritage and Research Association and adjunct professor of German studies at UBC Vancouver. Our conversation today is the first in our new post-conference series themed Black Germany and Beyond. My colleague, Dr. Emily Fraser-Rath, and I, and our students at Davidson College are delighted to welcome filmmaker Denise Ekale Kum to our virtual classroom. But before our discussion begins, I'll ask Emily if she will kindly introduce our special guest and share a little about our class before turning the conversation over to Denise and our students. Emily?
Thank you, Rosemary. My name is Emily Fraser-Rath, and I'm a visiting assistant professor of German studies at Davidson College, located just north of Charlotte, North Carolina in the US. I'm also the executive director of the BGHRA. We are so excited to be able to invite Denise Ekale Kum to our class, to Davidson College and to the BGHRA today. Today is February 24th, 2022, and we, Dr. Pena, me, and most importantly, our incredible Davidson students are in our 5th week together. This semester, Dr. Pena and I are so pleased to have another opportunity to work with Davidson students as we co-teach our second course together. German 351, or Race, Gender, Migration, asks us to employ a critical lens informed by Black German studies to questions of migration, belonging, and identity, as these big topics, big human topics, intersect with Germany, Austria, and Switzerland, with the German-speaking world, and with the lives and experiences of the global Black German community. The class, like its predecessor, consists of 3 parts. It is first an exploration of the aforementioned themes as they are or could be handled in the field of Black German studies. Second, it is a community-based learning course as we support the BGHRA through our work and will feature our final projects on the BGHRA archive. And third, it is, most importantly, an opportunity for students and through these recordings, our broader BGHRA and Davidson communities to speak with people whose lives and work intersect with, influence, shape, and inform Black German studies. This series, which is now called Black Germany and Beyond, as with much of the last series, All Black Lives Matter, would not be possible without the generous support of the Dean Rusk International Studies Program Speakers Fund here at Davidson, and the interim director of the Dean Rusk program, Dr. Verna Case, as well as the program administrator, Meg Zweifel, or Zwiefel. I also cannot ever thank Meg Sawicki, our German Studies Department Administrator, enough for her support, encouragement, and organization that truly has kept us going and remains a vital part of what we are doing. So to Meg, Mel, and to Verna, thank you. Before Dr. Pena and I fade into the background and turn things over to Denise and our wonderful students, I'd like to take a moment to introduce our guest, but I'll keep my remarks brief so that Denise can introduce herself in her own words. Denise Ekale Kum is a writer, director, editor who grew up between Cameroon and Germany and has lived in Brazil and Japan. In addition to her work as a consultant for the TV series Movement, which I want to hear more about. She has written, produced, and directed 3 short films, Winter Sonnenwende in 2016, Natsu's Treasure in 2017, and the film we've watched in preparation for our conversation with Denise today, Respringendo, 2019. So without further ado, I'm going to turn things over to Denise and to our students.
Yeah, hi, I'm Denise, super happy to be here and to meet all of you. Yes, as Emily say, I'm a filmmaker from Germany, originally from Cameroon. I've always had a passion for film, ended up studying computer science for some reason instead, and worked in that field for quite a while, and then kind of made my segue back into filmmaking as like a self-taught writer-director. I directed a couple of films, which you just heard of. I went into music videos also, like shortly before the pandemic. And since Corona hit, I started working for production companies. I was working for Pentertainment, which is a production company in Germany focused on the stories made by POC and bringing more voices of people of color into the German film landscape. We also signed a series for Disney Plus, which will be coming out end of the year next year, called Sam ein Sachse. That is the story of a Black German policeman in the 90s. And yes, after that, I started collaborating more with Netflix since the end of the year. Sorry. Yeah. And yeah, I think that is where I am at right now, and still kind of have a lot of ambition when it comes to directing feature films, which is for me the next step in my journey.
Wonderful. So I'd like to encourage our students. All of you have wonderful questions, which I shared with Denise prior to, but I'd like you all to ask what's interesting to you. And maybe we can start with questions related to Denise's journey as a filmmaker. And I'll get us started unless someone has another question going. Carson, you look like you might have something. Not yet? Okay. All right, I'll get us started. So what was it that triggered your interest in film? And why did you end up going to school for computer science? I mean, that's always like the question, right? Like we all go to school for things we don't end up doing in some ways. So can you talk about that journey for you?
Sure, sure. I mean, I think I always was interested in filmmaking from a young age on. I mean, I guess all kids like to watch TV, but I particularly like to watch TV. And at some point I just had that dream, okay, it would be really cool to actually be able to make some stuff. I think in my teenage years, I started watching making ofs and behind the scenes and interviews and getting really interested in being part of that world. And I think that's when I was about 14, I formulated for the first time the idea, okay, I want to be a director. And I think at that time it felt just impossible to me. Like, yeah, I mean, that's a dream, but it's not reality for me. Or I think it needed a friend of mine in school actually saying she wants to be a director. I was like, okay, I can say it too, And so initially when I finished school, I wanted to do that. But in Germany, what they do is that, oh, sorry. Can I maybe leave you for 5 minutes because this is a super, super urgent call? I'm very, very sorry. I have like an emergency going on today.
Of course, we'll pause the recording. All right, we're back after a short pause. And Carson has a question for you.
Okay, great.
Awesome. Yeah, you mentioned that through a lot of your work, you're trying to bring more Black voices into the German film industry. I'm wondering, what does that look like today? Like, where are we at right now with that? Where are you trying to move that? And what barriers do you have to overcome? And off of that, how does the public normally react? Like, is there more criticism that you generally face as a filmmaker? Are there a lot more, I don't know, just things of that nature?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that the conversation in Germany is not at the same point as in the US, for example. I think there's just less people who are sensitive to the issue, less people understanding the issue as a whole, and especially people in power. Like a lot of them are starting to kind of discover these issues. And even those who discover the issues and say, and I think that was the experience working with that specific company, because we had a lot of, bigger companies trying to lend the support, but often we kind of came to a point where we realized that they want to do something, but when it comes to actually doing a lot, we felt that they don't really have, it's kind of putting your money where your mouth is like everybody wants to do something, but when it was about like getting funding and really hiring people, that became more difficult. So I feel like in Germany, the conversation is still very far back. So it was kind of a battle a little bit, but with some wins, because we did have that show signed for Disney Plus, so which is a great thing. And it's gonna, we did our best to hire as many people of color behind the camera as well as in front. So I hope that will help some things move forward. But in general, I think in Germany, this is a conversation to be had and a conversation being had, but it's still kind of in an infancy state where some people obviously are frustrated, especially people of color working in the film industry, feeling that, they've been there for a long time and been ignored for a long time, and the steps are kind of slow for what they want. But I think things are happening, and yeah, I'm still hopeful. I'm still hopeful for things to get better, but it's not quite there yet. Yeah. But I think what I can do from my side, and that's always what I thought, is that I can just do my films the way I envisioned them. You know, I can always try to kind of fight to do my own things. And so far, because I've done everything without public support, but that also means on my own and with my own agenda, I always have the possibility. And I think every young person, every filmmaker has that option to just do what you think is right and cast the people you think, you know, have a story to tell. And, you know, that's also another way of going about it while the structure is also being changed slowly.
Could you talk to us a little bit about sort of the German film industry in general and how funding is allocated? Because we've talked, this class has had the opportunity to not speak with, but view the films of Bronwyn Okpako and Zara Blaskowitz. Mm-hmm. And then we talked with John Kantara earlier this semester, who does documentary films, which is a little different, and for news outlets. And then last year at Davidson, we invited Sherry Hagen to speak with us. So, and in many of these cases, with John being the exception, there's not much financial support, right, for all of these films. And so where does that come from? Who makes those decisions? Who's in power? Hi, Steffi's Oma. Steffi's Oma. Yeah.
Yes. So I mean, that is definitely an issue, right? I think in Germany, most films are funded not. I think in America there's more like private funding. Here it's mostly public funding in order to be able to do a film, which are like the funding institutions, and mostly that's not enough. In order to even get that funding, you need to be supported by a bigger German production company and mostly also a TV station. And those are institutions who are like super old, super white, super male. So mostly when you come with other subjects, it's really difficult to get funding. I've never gotten funding. I mean, some of the names you name, I've spoken with them, they haven't gotten it either. Everybody's just trying to do the films on their own. And obviously there are limitations to that. So it's a big issue that we are very dependent on very old institutions, and especially like the TV institutions are very kind of bureaucratic and also not creatively very flexible. So it's, even if you would get funding, it might be really difficult to have this kind of vision kind of shared and also dominated by people who do not really understand it or do not share, you know, a certain knowledge of these topics. So it in Germany to get funding, because I think even as I said, even most of the bigger production companies do not really understand. And that's what I've done in the working with that production company Pentertainment before. I understood that the bigger production companies do not understand those topics either. So most of the time, the only way something can get funded easily is if you really focus on what like to hear stories of, you know, pain and misery, drug dealers, and, you know, all these kind of things. You know, that's what might get you funding easier. But if you have a little bit more differentiated, nuanced view of the subject, which is what authenticity is and which is what is interesting, often the people deciding, I feel like they don't even have the necessary knowledge to properly appreciate those kind of stories. And it's been difficult. I mean, some people are trying to change. I think in Hamburg, there's one funding institution that kind of did some sort of, I think the Oscars, it's the same, some sort of list where you have to kind of, it's not a must, so I don't know how much that will actually change, but they're trying to evaluate projects to diversity and inclusion according to different, you know, like subjects. And maybe that might, at least in Hamburg, change something in terms of how they look at projects and who gets funded. But it's definitely an issue, yeah, in Germany.
Yeah, it sounds like academia too, where you have to answer to, you know, the old ways of doing things a lot and sort of find your way through. Other questions before we move on to another? Carson? No. You leaned forward, so I took it.
Yeah, I was looking at my note sheet. You caught me. Denise, I'm just wondering, like, where would you say your ultimate motivation and inspiration comes from with everything you're doing and achieving for?
That's a good question. I mean, the motivation, I guess, well, I mean, making films, especially making films without funding, without support, is a very uphill battle sometimes, and very much of an up and down. But I guess I really feel like the stories I want to tell, I don't see them that way, like in you know, in the landscape that I'm in. And I feel like I want to see those stories. I want to tell those stories. I want the stories to be out there, but I also very much enjoy telling stories. I also very much like directing and doing this sort of work. And I've been working, as I said before, in very different lines of work. And that is the one that is the most fascinating to me. And that alone kind of pushes me forward to feel like, okay, I really enjoy doing this. And at the moment, I will not get hired for it. So I have to kind of make up my own stories. And that is also a benefit because I can tell, you know, also not limit myself, because I've done different films so far and they're all kind of different from each other. And it is also a liberty that I have, you know, not being part of a film school or being part of some government funding, is that I can really tell stories the way I like to tell them, or in very different ways, and focus on different subjects and experiment a lot. So yeah, I think that just pushes me forward. I think until I'm bored with telling stories as a whole, I don't think I will stop.
I have a question. So you said that you're not part of a film school. So you might have already answered this, but have you gotten any kind of formal instruction on how to make films? And also I had another question that doesn't really pertain to that, but how do you think that your computer science has helped you in the field that you're in right now?
Yeah, yeah, I can answer to both, basically continuing the story that I broke off before, which is that the thing is that I couldn't really go to a film school right away. That's what I planned basically. When I finished school, I was like, okay, I'm gonna go to film school and then I'm gonna be a director and everything's gonna be awesome. And that didn't really happen because in Germany, there is kind of, you can't really go to film school right after school. They don't really take people. They want you to have like experience, which is why I ended up studying media and computing, which ended up being very much computing. And that's kind of how I veered off of it. So basically after a couple of years in computing, I realized that I already have a daughter who was born also after I finished studying. And I felt like going back to film school doesn't really make sense to me. I won't be able to afford it, but I can just try to do it on my own. So most of my training was like, I took a year off, a sabbatical from programming. And I think the internet is a great resource because most of the stuff I learned was obviously by watching films, you know, and trying to dissect them, but also like YouTube videos, you know, about editing, about how to edit a fight scene, because it was a fight scene in my first movie. I learned a lot from there, or how to do this and how to do A and how to do B, and also working on other film sets, you know, like when I started getting this interest strongly, or the wish to actually do it strongly, I was like on short film sets, working as a continuity person, working as, I think one I even was like a background actor, but kind of observing, okay, how do they organize the shoot? What is a call sheet? What does that look like? And that also taught me a lot. So basically getting my knowledge from, you know, small projects in the industry, from the internet, and also from reading a lot of scripts that I enjoyed myself. So this is basically how I kind of taught myself to do it. And that's why this kind of 1 year that I took was really great, because I could focus for 6 months just on learning how to do it and also applying it to the project that I wanted to do. And as for your second question, programming, the funny thing is, every time I told people when I was still a programmer, I told people that I want to do films, and they were like, maybe you can combine and do special effects. And I always felt like I'm not interested in the technical side of filmmaking. I'm really interested in the creative and then the, you know, my directing side. But I think if I look back right now, what did help is just, you know, I learned I'm technically, you know, like I'm skilled technically, so I can use a lot of different programs. I don't really have an issue learning them. I can learn them really quickly, which is great. But also I use some of the stuff that we use for like managing a project, for example, in the IT industry. I use that on my films because a lot of film people are more like scattered and then things are very disorganized. And I felt like, okay, I can actually use that organization that I learned from the other industry to actually apply it here. So my projects are a little bit more structured and a little bit more in control, which was sometimes difficult because film people are not used to that. And then they were kind of rebelling against it, but I always felt like, you know, some of those things can actually be great. You know, especially like I feel in the film industry, there's still a lot of tools that can actually be invented to make life easier. And I think being between the two, I felt like, that's some stuff that if I find it, I can do it. If I was interested in programming more, I actually would have been interested in programming stuff, because I think there's a lot of tools that you could actually make money off of, because it's not there yet. But I was more interested in finding whatever is out there and making my life easier, you know, as a filmmaker. So that's, I think, how the programming came into play.
I had a question. It kind of goes off of what Carson was talking about with your inspiration. What inspired you to make the short film Resplendung? And with your other films, are there aspects from your own personal life that you put into those films?
Yeah, I think I would say so far from every single one, there's always an aspect of my personal life. I try not to make them autobiographical because I think that would bore me. I'm really interested in fiction and telling stories, but I think from the moment of like honesty and authenticity, there's always some emotion, at least, that I take from myself to kind of base the films around. So Resplendung was my third film. I think the motivation in that one, you know, apart from, you know, being the third film in the series, was that, or what I wanted to tell most, and that can maybe go back to what I wanted to do with all the short films I did. Actually, I wanted to do 4 of them, like 1 per each season, and I haven't finished it. Like, I'm still missing Autumn. But the main idea was basically, okay, I want to do films, so I'm gonna try and make my own film school. And in order to have sort of a curriculum or something to kind of guide myself, I'm going to make a film series about 1 film per season. And the idea was that it's always focused strongly on one person, it's 1 season and 1 specific theme that is based on the season. So for the first movie I did, Winter Solstice, the idea was like the feeling of fear. And I kind of took that to kind of create a story around the film. And it also was personal because it was my very first film that I made. It was this kind of jump out of this comfort zone of, you know, programming and IT and going towards filmmaking, which was very scary also. So it was also a great theme to kind of work on, you know, like fear and overcoming fear while actually being fearful of what's ahead and actually using the themes in my personal and professional life. And for Respingendo, the idea was that it's spring, and I wanted to be centered about the idea of hope. And it's also kind of in between of the 2 films I've made so far, because it's in between winter and summer. So I wanted to kind of go from the feeling we have in the first film, which is kind of dark and, you know, kind of, you know, oppressing, going towards the feeling that you have in the summer film, which is called Natsu no Takaramono, that I shot in Japan, which is about friendship and kind of open, and they're outside and it's sunny and everything. So basically the journey for that film was also kind of to navigate between the 2. So that was basically, that's kind of what drove me to the story, or that was the main theme of the story to be told. And I think I tried to put it in different elements of the film, but that was also obviously the main motivation. And I think for that film, maybe additionally, it was also the idea of, I kind of took from my life for Respingendo, I took the moment where I wanted to go to film school when I finished school, and they told me, no, you can't come here because you're too young and you need life experience. And at time, because I felt like that is what I want to do, I really felt like it's a major setback and I don't know what to do with my life anymore. And I had so many different journeys in my life that moment doesn't matter anymore. And maybe it was even right for my particular journey. But I remember that feeling of feeling like really just like thrown off and not knowing what to do anymore. And I think I channeled a lot of that into the story, having a character that has a setback in her life, you know, also coming from institutions and kind of feeling like she doesn't know what to do with herself anymore. And I think I wanted to speak with younger people, maybe at a similar point in life with that film, and try to kind of convey that message that, you know, those setbacks on the long term don't really matter. And it's more about like finding your own voice and finding your own way independently of whatever the system or the structures are. So I think that was also one of the main messages that I wanted to convey with that film.
So maybe it's time to jump into our questions about Respingendo. And I think my first question is, where did you come up with this name, and what does it mean?
Yeah, yeah, it's a question I get a lot because people are confused by the name of the film. But it's kind of a mixture of 2 things, because each film that I did kind of has the name of the season in it. even if in different languages, but the name is always there. And so this one is spring, and it's a mixture of the word spring and the Italian word restringendo, which is a musical term that means that it's supposed to describe the moment where the music, where the rhythm in a certain piece becomes faster again. So I felt that it was very fitting to the story in general, that is like something that has gotten slower and is becoming faster again. And obviously spring mixed together makes it restringendo. But normally it's restringendo with a T, the Italian word.
That's really cool. I like that a lot. So maybe we can turn then to your questions about the role of music in the film, the role of music in your life. Anyone want to ask a specific question or?
Say something, because I had many questions revolving around music. I feel like that there were scenes specifically in this short film where there was no one was talking, there was no language being used, and music was that language and was what was being expressed. And I'm just wondering how do you find music to be important in moments of silence and as a means of communication?
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, I mean, for that specific movie, we thought a lot about music and the role of music, because I mean, obviously music is a tool when you're, in filmmaking to convey feelings, emotion, especially when nothing is being said. But at the same time, it's also the topic of the film, and the main kind of thing the protagonist is trying to kind of figure out for herself. So we talked a lot about, or I had this very idea from the very beginning that I'm not going to use actually a lot of music. Like, we didn't hire anybody to make music throughout the film. There is not much music going on. There's some certain sounds, but we work more with sounds and music. And the idea was that because we're telling the story of somebody who's struggling to find a way back to music, it wouldn't feel right to have moments beforehand kind of being supported by music, So if you pay attention, music doesn't really exist in the film until she actually starts playing herself. And as for the moment where she's playing herself, obviously, since we've been withholding on music for so long, since we've seen her struggle, I mean, at least that's what I try to express, seen her struggle with actually being able to play, I think there's a lot of emotional load in her music and in her just coming out with the music. And I think it talks a lot, especially around the end. It kind of, hopefully, if it works for you, for the audience, it's supposed to kind of resolve a lot of the tension that's been built up throughout the music, throughout the movie. And should I also answer about music in my life and in the film? So I mean, yeah, music in the film, I think I said it because it's about this young person. I mean, in my private life, it was about film, and in this story, it's about music, but it was very much about her finding her way back to her music. And it was about, this feeling that, okay, the institution told her she's not good enough, she's not talented enough, whatever, or at least that's a feeling that she gets. And it's about kind of finding her own way also through music, expressing her own art, expressing herself, but also not losing the love to what you want to do because some institution, somebody higher up, quote unquote, tells you it's not good enough. As for music in my own life, I mean, I love music. It's like, it's so essential, and it can, help you through hard times, help you party, help you with any kind of feeling. I feel like in music, there's every feeling for every music, for every kind of feeling you can have. And I love listening to music very much. I don't know how to create any, I'm not good at it particularly, but I very much enjoy it. So I feel like it's always been part of my films. There are films where I lean more on music, also supporting everything. In this film, I wanted to have only the music actually played on set to be in there, but I feel like music is a powerful tool, like sound and music in general, sound also, because here we work with sound a lot, can convey a lot of feelings and help really support films in a really grand way.
So my question isn't really focused on the music, but the first scene of the film, like we're introduced to like Sousa's apartment, and it's like really messy. And we hear this frantic phone call, and then we see like her on the bed, like, and we can imply that like maybe she's not alive anymore. So what was your thinking behind the scene, and like what was the message you were trying to send?
Yeah. So I think that was for two different purposes. That was, I mean, the easier purpose was kind of the surprise moment, to kind of build up on the surprise moment later when she hits it, and also kind of relief, okay, she's still there and things are not as bad as they seem, you know, and also to have this kind of balance that I have in the film between really dark moments, but also some humor. And I think that moment introduces it well, that, you know, there are going to be some deep topics, but also we're not just going to leave you, you know, in the dark places, but we're also going to give you some relief from once in a while. I think that beginning kind of frames it. And also it also kind of is that darker part of the film, right? Especially when you don't know what happens afterwards yet, to give you kind of an intro of, okay, this is heavy, and the character is in a very bad space. And I also wanted the beginning to contrast very much with the end. Also thinking about going from this winter movie to the summer movie, to have this kind of dark, really dark space that we're basically continuing from the dark atmosphere I had in the first film, to kind of going to this, you know, more cheerful one. So even in the coloring, when she's still in the apartment, we played a lot with kind of subdued colors, subdued light and everything, because she's in this really dark space. So I think we have many different things to kind of convey that, but also that one moment, which is also obviously for the audience unexpected, a little bit shocking, kind of shows where she is emotionally. I mean, she hasn't done any of that, but that's where kind of her state is, basically. That was also supposed to convey that. Yeah.
Who's next? So I really like this question from Steffi, and I'll read it. The plotline of this story is incredibly relatable, especially for students in current times. I mean, I don't want to read my own thoughts into your question, Steffi, but what I was thinking when you said that was like this feeling of isolation, like everyone's, you know, like there's not a lot of connection happening right now because of or, you know, for the last 2 years because of the pandemic. Like there's also these feelings of rejection that are intertwined with like being a student and getting yourself out there and stuff. Steffi, do you want to add anything to that feeling of being a student?
I completely agree. And applying to undergrad, I think, has been a journey for everyone. Maybe Davidson wasn't our first choice, or it was our first choice. And that feeling of rejection is always incredibly hurtful, the feeling that you're not good enough. And as Dr. Fraser-Rath noted, the pandemic has really heightened that feeling. So I was curious to, as of, like, you already touched on the inspiration of the story, but what's the significance of that? Was that a feeling to like relieve the feeling of, you know, being isolated and feeling that you're not good enough?
Yeah, I mean, it touched very much this feeling that you're not good enough. And I think, as you just said, right, this is maybe some experiences some of you made already. And I remember from my own experience, when you're very young, it can feel like the end of the world. And I think that's why I wanted it to be. It feels, for this character, it's for her the end of the world. And but looking back, I mean, I'm 37 now. Looking back, it was absolutely not. It was not at all. And there's so much out there and so much you can do. And your path is not so much shaped by the nose. And even if when it is, it's not always a bad thing. So I basically wanted to take the life experience that I've had afterwards and kind of go back to how I felt and maybe talk to myself when I was that age, and hopefully thereby talk to other people the same age. So I think that reaction, being able to take it lightly, and especially, I mean, I don't know how many of you will go into more artistic endeavors, but you get a lot of no's and a lot of rejection, which is always hurtful. But I think learning to deal with that it's not about you personally. It doesn't mean that your work isn't of value. It doesn't mean that you're not of value. It just means that this one door isn't opening right now. And at the end of the day, that can even open some other stuff. So for example, I did not go to film school that after that summer, because like they deemed me too young, but I ended up going to Brazil because I didn't really have a plan B. And that was a major experience in my life. And I learned so much there about just so many things in life. It was my first time without my parents, my first time alone in a foreign country. And I also worked with an organization working with children who were living in the streets and everything. So even in terms of like lives, you know, in different, how complicated life can be, how you know, like just see a world outside of my own. I learned a lot. So if I had gone to film school right away, I would not have had the experience and so many other experiences that I made along the way before I actually started doing films. Like, for example, being a mom helped me a lot, being actually a leader on a film team. So there's so much that I took where I felt like now if I look back, maybe it was great that I didn't start that with 16 that I was at the time, you know, and maybe I didn't have the maturity, or maybe it would have gone in the wrong direction, or I would have let somebody else shape my story or the way I tell stories. So in the end, it's always all right. So I felt like I wanted to tell that younger person, that younger me, and hopefully other people, that it's not sometimes you have that plan and it's not about that plan fulfilling itself. It's just about you finding yourself throughout the journey. And that's what I wanted to say. And as for isolation, that is something obviously I did not foresee that this would be a big topic after this film. Like isolation is a big topic in this film because she does isolate herself. She doesn't go to work anymore. She doesn't go to school. She's just shut up in her home. And also it was more about this, you know, by choice, obviously, but what it does to your emotions, what it does to you in general. And there's that scene where she speaks with Tarek and, you know, I wanted them to be together while not being together still. So she's at her window, he's downstairs. And for her, like the first moment of going outside is so significant. And now it's crazy, right? Because I think we can all relate to that feeling right now, because we all had that moment of being locked in and then maybe finding back, or I mean, not entirely yet. We have not even found back to a normal yet. I mean, I don't know how it is where you live, but yeah, it became something that everybody experienced. But for me at the time, it was very much about giving a framing to her feelings and her feelings of hurt and a feeling of desolation, and her just retreating from life and retreating from things that could be good for her, actually, like her friends, like going to the park and playing music. So, and how, you know, and or the sun just in general, being outside and it's sunny and it's warm. And that's also like in all these films, also the season itself has a role in a certain way. So in the winter film, you can really feel that it's super cold. And then in this film, it was about, you know, the sunshine coming back, spring, you know, this idea of finally it's sunny out again. And for her to experience that after being not just in winter, but also in winter in an apartment in a certain way, because it's all really dark and she's all shut in. So yeah, I mean, tragically, it's become something that everybody's kind of experiencing or has experienced. But yeah, originally, obviously, it was to convey that feeling of how low she feels and how that can make you, you know, kind of hurt yourself even more because you're not engaging in the things that could be good for you.
Yeah, it strikes me that, I mean, it's also a story of mental health in that way.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure many of us can relate to that idea of, you know, depression and being depressed and then it just sort of feeding itself.
Yeah.
And so that even makes the sort of last scene really hopeful in many other ways, like on many different levels. Yeah.
Yeah.
Rosemary,
Yes,
do you have a question?
Yes, you spoke quite a bit about your travel, but and I had the opportunity to watch your film about the young girl in Japan. But I'm wondering, because your films are so, how can I say, multicultural, and people that are in unexpected places with unexpected voices. So I'd like to know how your own travel experiences and your facility with different languages and experience with different cultural groups, how does that feed into the films that you make and those that you hope to make ongoing in the future?
Yeah, I think it feeds into it a lot. I mean, it's part of who I am, and it's part of, you know, like my reality. That is also where I've realized not everybody's reality, right? Most people are either monocultural or kind of bicultural. And I've had this opportunity to travel to different countries, speak different languages, which also kind of helps you to connect with people on a deeper level. And I enjoy that very much. So I think even that joy about that, I want to put that in my film. So there's a little bit of Portuguese that I put, Brazilian Portuguese that I put in Respingendo, because I had that affinity with Brazil and that experience that I made myself. So I put a little bit of that into it. And I very much enjoy that. I mean, it's not even coming from the point of, oh, that makes it unique. It's really, I have fun with it and I want to do more of it. I want to experiment with films where people, for example, don't speak one language. So for example, in my family, we speak German and French at once, kind of, you know, in one sentence as both of them. And I've never seen anybody do that in a film. So I would like to try and see how that works out, because it's my reality and it's a reality that seems to surprise people who are not, you know, who didn't grow up like that. And yet it's a reality of so many other people I know. And I think I remember when I first showed like one of the early cuts of Respingendo to one of my friends who's like, who's white German, and she said that, yeah, she wasn't really sure about the end scene if kind of the diversity feels forced, and because there's so many people from different cultures. And I was telling her, but that's what my birthdays look like, you know, that's what my friend group looks like, that's my reality. Like I can understand that it can look like a Benetton commercial, but that is my people basically, and I want them to be displayed on screen just like everybody else. And I think if I do it from a point of authenticity, when you actually see the final film, it doesn't feel forced or, you know, like fake. But yeah, that is the kind of people I am with. And I think it's also important to me to kind of, because I think one of the things I learned early on, you know, traveling between cultures, is how similar we are as people, and how much, you know, our humanity is putting us so much closer than the differences in culture we might have. And I feel like maybe giving also a voice to that in my films is something that is important to me, because I feel like many people not being able to travel or not meeting people from other cultural backgrounds don't have the opportunity to understand that. So that's something that I want to tell also with my films, is that, hey, you can have that person that is super similar to you, or you have that little girl in Japan who speaks Japanese, who's grown up there, and that's her world, and that's perfectly normal. This is not questioned in the film, because, you know, that is other people's realities. And I feel like if I have the chance with my film to not just display my personal experience, but also maybe help some people see something they haven't seen before, and through that maybe, you know, understanding other people better, then, you know, that's a great thing. That's a great thing I can do.
Beautiful. I thank you for that. I think that that's a feature of your film collection that I enjoy most. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Could you talk a little bit about the production of this film? Like, did you face any challenges with finding like shooting locations, or with the actresses, actors, things like that?
Actually, it was actually quite smooth, because that was my third film. I already knew some people I wanted to work with. I think the biggest challenge in terms of looking for actors was the main actress, because I wanted somebody to still look young enough to be convincing in that role. Because I felt like, I mean, we've spoken about it. It's an experience of somebody kind of, you know, is a kind of student age. So I felt like if somebody looks 26, is not gonna feel the same. But also I had to find an Afro-German actress, because that was important to me, that this role is Afro-Brazilian and German at the same time. So that was also a challenge to find somebody, and hopefully somebody who can kind of hold the guitar and it doesn't look weird. And I ended up looking for a long time, not finding anybody, and then remembering a newspaper clipping that I found of an actual guitarist, a young girl. She was 16 at the time. She had just won an award for something, for being a singer-songwriter. And I remember seeing that clipping. I was like, wow, she looks exactly like I envisioned my character. And when I was just starting to write it, and then 2 years later, I didn't find an actress. So I started kind of looking for her, like if she's still out there, if maybe, you know, she might have some talent in that way. And I found her, and she looked a little bit older, like the perfect age for the role. And even in the picture, like maybe she has some acting talent. So that was actually quite funny, because I reached out to her. I basically stalked her and I found her, and I got to talk to her, and she was kind of curious about it. And we did like my miniature acting school to kind of see if she has what it takes to do this role, and if she can work with me. And we both enjoyed it. And yeah, we ended up doing the film together, which was pretty great. And she's still she's focused more on music right now, and she's kind of popping up more and more, like being on big Spotify lists and everything. Her name is Cloudy June, if you're interested. I think that was in terms, but it wasn't that much a challenge. It was actually quite joyful, because I think at the moment I was like, oh, I might not find somebody who is exactly what I'm looking for. I found somebody who's basically, you know, she had so many things in her personal life that were fitting to the role, and that was kind of perfect. And apart from that, I think the biggest production challenges that we had in this production was that I had some people, I think, who were not up to the task, because I have to rely on basically people who work for like a small amount, or just, we're feeding everybody, where they're not having any cost, but we can't actually afford to pay like proper salaries. So we kind of rely on people who are really motivated and who just love to do it, who are starting out. So I think in my first films, I was lucky, especially in the first one, of having people who are very, very already far along the way, but since they were interested in my project, they joined. But there I had some people actually who were not able in the end to do what they were supposed to do for the role. So that was kind of a challenge, last minute finding people. But I mean, I did find great people in the end, who were able to really work into the project. And even those where it didn't work out, we kept a great relationship. So I guess for that project, it was bigger than the other ones. I think maybe if I have to think, like the biggest challenge was also editing, because it was theoretically just a bit longer than the others, and 10 minutes longer doesn't feel like that much, but in editing it's a lot. And I realized the difference between, for example, the first film that I did, that was like 7 minutes including credits, so the movie itself is 4 minutes. So if, for example, you're in the editing room, you're watching 4 minutes, you're talking about it, and you do the next edit. If you're doing Respringendo, you're watching it for 30 minutes. If you're pausing, you're watching it for an hour. And that changed so much in how fast we were able to do. So that production editing was much slower than the other ones, or just more challenging, where I really understood, okay, I think the next step cannot be 35 minutes. It has to be like feature film with proper funding, where the person who's sitting there is also properly paid, or, or much shorter, but I don't want to do something in between anymore, because it's just, especially in editing, it's very, very challenging. It's just a lot of work. And then it's asking too much for somebody that you cannot afford to pay like a production company would. Yeah.
Could you tell us what this term? Oh God, I don't have Portuguese at all. So via demai, what that means?
Actually, I think that's one of the favorite curse words of the mom where I was staying in Brazil. She used to curse everybody like that. It's quite a funny curse word, because at the beginning I didn't understand Portuguese, so I thought it's something really rude. But when I started understanding it, I was like, it's just son of your mother, basically. So instead of putting something nasty in the back, she just puts your mother. So it means son of your mother. It's not a real insult, but it's something she said a lot when she was angry, and that I ended up putting in the film. Yeah.
I really like that. And she also works at presumably a Portuguese restaurant then.
Yeah, exactly. So the idea is that she works in a Brazilian restaurant, and they have that. Yeah. I think I took the name of also one of the characters of the most popular telenovela when I was staying there, Dona Jura, which owned the bar, and there was this young people working there. So I kind of transported that setup. And the thing in the original telenovela, it was this kind of motherly Black woman who was owning that place with the younger people working there. So that's who kind of envisioned, and having this kind of motherly insults for the people, not very rude, but more kind of charming.
I like that a lot. And could you tell us a little bit about, the character of Tariq is played by Pasar Hariki. Yes. And then the character of the weirdo in the park, quote unquote, is Pepsi W Hazelnut. Yeah. Could you talk to us about that?
Yeah, I mean, that's his stage name. I don't know if he's still using it. It was really interesting. I mean, I just discovered a lot of great people where I was so grateful to work with them, or where it just fit perfectly. So I found for Souza somebody who was just so much the character herself, that it was such, a gift to work with her. And for the guy in the park, it was also really funny, because he's actually a documentary filmmaker, and he was just interested in playing roles. At some point did a lot of improv, and he was really interested in like extreme characters. So I think he just put out, when I was still writing, he put out like, hey, I want to work, and these are some of the pictures. And it already looked a bit like what I envisioned, somebody a little more extreme. And I talked to him, and I was so interested in this kind of characters. So it was really also a real gift to just have somebody who wants to play exactly what I basically would, and has a lot of giving, that he wants to give into it, and that was really interesting. So that's why his stage name is also a little bit weird, because that's not what he normally does. But he liked that one. I was like, okay, I'll put it in the credits if that's what you want. But yeah, and for Passau also, that was great finding him, because I remember a very frustrating casting journey of going through people who had that kind of, you know, ethnicity I was looking for, that had worked on German TV, but it wasn't quite the level of just, you know, talent that I was looking for. Also, the problem in German TV is that those kind of people also get cast a lot in really negative roles. It's always super macho, aggressive. And so I didn't really find somebody where I felt like that's the feeling I wanted for this character. And I think that character also meant a lot to me because I did want to portray, you know, Middle Eastern German in a way that I actually encountered them, you know, the way I actually saw them, the way I befriend them, and not the way they're shown on TV all the time. And that's why I wanted what I've seen also from my friend group, people who are really warm and very kind and very giving. And, you know, and just, you know, I have some guy friends who are very, very, you know, attentive also in a certain way when it comes, and protective when it comes to the long friendships that they had. So that's what I wanted to put into this role, and I wanted somebody who was able to portray it and had that charm, basically. So I think I found Passat. I think he was still new on those casting sites. He didn't have a demo reel yet or anything, but just from the pictures, I felt like, okay, this is the vibe I'm looking for. And we had a great talk, and he's really like also politically very, very engaged, very, you know, has a lot of knowledge about different subjects. And, you know, we totally hit it off, and he was just perfect for the role. So I'm really grateful to have found him too.
So someone wrote, you know, that they're a little confused about the role that that the again, the quote unquote weirdo in the park, how he fits into the story.
Yeah.
So and can you speak to us a little about that? And I mean, it's right in the middle, right? It's sort of a turning point, but what is going on there?
Yeah, so I think what I wanted to achieve with that role, or the message I wanted to convey, was that sometimes wisdom does not always come from the places you expect it to. And it was about, you know, and especially since she has, you know, those institutional people basically verify to tell her where she's supposed to go, not giving her the right message, and that the message that she gets does not come from a person who is respected. He's basically the antithesis of what, you know, those schools are supposed to project. So it was about somebody obviously who's also struggling with a lot of things and has his own issues, but at the same time is still able to kind of connect with her on a certain level, you know, even if it is just a feeling that they're both, you know, down at the moment or in a difficult period in time, and who does find something in her and who does just try to help her, even though it's not, you know, it's not planned, or, you know, it's not, I'm going to sit you down and tell you something. But I felt like sometimes I had moments in my own life where what I needed to hear did not come from, or to see basically did not come from a place that I expected, or did not come from even somebody who knew me. You know, sometimes you can tell your friends your problems, they can't help you. And sometimes it's something very random that speaks exactly to you and to what you need to hear. And I think that's also that kind of randomness of life that I wanted to add with this character, but also with the feeling of giving somebody like him some space and some respect, and, you know, like, and without kind of trying to change the character or portray him as something that he's not, but it's still saying that there's value in that person, and it can add value to somebody else's life, and, you know, be a person, you know, like be part of the spaces that we inhabit without a feeling. Because I think I play a lot with that also in the scene, that she does not feel like the first thing she wants to do is to stand up and go away, and is kind of frightened by him, and yet she learns a lot from him and he gives a lot to her. So I think that was important to me.
Yeah, I like him a lot, and he actually reminds me of one of the characters in Sherry Hagen's film Auf den zweiten Blick. So the man who's he's blind, and he can't but he often talks to sort of voices who keep him company, and there's a lot of wisdom there that comes out. It's sort of a beautiful thing.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, and it also reminds me too of this. I mean, this is a larger question, I think, in general, of our mission here, with not only with the BGHRA, but in this class and in the class that preceded it, that we are looking for, knowledge and wisdom and experiences that are not, are not necessarily mainstream, right? Or not necessarily studied or canonized in any way. And so it just is a nice filmic reminder of that same message, right? Like, it's not just about the scholars who write like peer-reviewed articles or something, or about even the films that exist, and the feature films that are receiving like Oscars and whatever, right? There's so much more out there that we need to be paying attention to. So many more perspectives.
Yes, totally. And also, like, often we forget that everything that we perceive and like is a personal journey. So just because something is acclaimed, it doesn't mean that it's what you need to hear or what you need to see or what you can connect with. So there can be something, or, a piece of art, a piece of wisdom, a piece of music that, most critics would say is garbage, and yet it hits you exactly the right way and it gives you exactly what you need. So I think I'm so interested in also finding ways to kind of diversify the voices that we get to hear and the faces that we get to see, and not just in terms of diversity as is often framed, but just in terms of smaller things getting a platform, because because some gatekeepers don't agree that it's valuable, it doesn't mean that it cannot be exactly what you need to have in that moment.
Speaking to that, I would like to ask what the reception of your films has been, not only from the public, which is important, but from your intimate circle, your own community. What kind of feedback have you received? And tell me, what is your favorite film that you've created, and what moment in that film brings you the most joy?
Wow, that's a good question. Well, going to the first one, it's so difficult to frame, right? Because we often frame these kind of questions around the audience and awards and, like basically gatekeepers, which is sometimes not very healthy. And obviously my film not having had access to funding, and that counts also a lot when applying to festivals and everything, sometimes, the visibility I think I had wished for all three of those films did not really happen. And I think I understood very quickly that, without the right, how you say, stamp on your film, be it a production company or a big funding or something, you might not be able to get access to that greater visibility. That being said, I think I had a lot of really great moments when sharing the films with obviously, like I always do like a private premiere with like friends and family, which is also great, but also I'm always so nervous that I think I'm not really sure what they say about it. But like when the more I see the film, the more I can actually, chill and see the film or be part of those spaces. And I've had great talks around different films, like with people, like, for example, I remember one moment where I was at African Motion Festival in Glasgow, and I think the short films are created by students, and they gave me some feedback about the film. And I was like an Afro-British student who really talked about Natsuno Takara Mono, Natsu's Treasure, how much it meant to her and how much she liked it. And I think in those kind of talks, love seeing other people's perspective on the film, because like I can talk a lot about what I'm trying to say, but at the end of the day, it's a different film for everybody who experiences it. And it's always very interesting to me when somebody actually finds a connection to it, to see where it's coming from and what they took away from it or what they see in it, which is also very interesting to me. So I think around the three films, I've had a lot of great discussions. And I think what I like, because I use personal themes in those stories, so when somebody connects to it, it's mostly a personal story, this personal connection that they have, and we can have a personal conversation. I think that's the thing I like the most about it, that is not so much about, oh my god, that camera equipment you use or something, but it's about, oh, I had the topic of fear and I can totally relate, or I remember what it was like being a child and losing your friend, and so you can actually have, through those stories that I tell, I end up having very personal stories with the people who connect to them. And I think I like that very much. As for what is my favorite film and favorite moment, that's really difficult because I think I cannot even see those films as films. I cannot watch them as a normal person. Like, that's the only thing I kind of find sad, that I can never properly watch my films. I cannot even evaluate if they're good or not. I can just say, okay, I had a lot of feedback where I feel like, okay, what I tried to tell was conveyed or not. But So for me, those individual films are individual journeys, you know, like the first film is about me trying to make films for the very first time and meeting people who supported me, which was great, and who helped me finish it. But it was also about all those feelings I had and certain things I didn't know. And the Japanese film was about doing something more spontaneous, but also struggling a lot because I did a lot of it myself, and discovering that and enjoying that. And from my perspective, even this film was about having a bigger crew, which was also like, this film was more complex. We had more actors, we had more background people, we had a bigger crew. Everything was just on a much bigger scale, but still trying to kind of bring everything in the same direction. I think that was the biggest challenge, working with my crew in order to finish it. And so I think I have a lot of great moments in those films, but it's probably more the behind the scene moments than the actual moments in the films. And I think the only things I enjoy in the films are moments who actually bring out a great audible reaction from audiences. So I've been watching those films in the audience many, many times. And I have no interest in watching the film. I can't, I don't know, it's like watching something so different than if I would watch somebody else's film, because I can't really get into it emotionally, but I'm really interested in the audience. So I think for example, one of my favorite moments in one of my films is the first jump scare in Winter Solstice, because I hear people scream in the audience, and I love that very much because that's an imminent reaction. And unfortunately, because of the pandemic, I haven't seen Rispringende with audiences many times. I think it just happened like twice. But that was also cool to see, okay, people are laughing here, or people are reacting here, and that is that's really cool to kind of see. But since I haven't done that yet, I'll just know that one moment that I enjoy watching is with an audience, when some people jump and scream when when they get scared by the first movie. I like that.
So since you kind of make your films independently, how do you go about like publicizing or getting like the word out that you like finished your film?
Yeah, that's a difficult thing, because I think that's not a major skill that I have. Like, I'm not a marketing person. I'm not even a proper producer. I'm not interested in all of that. I like making the films, but there's a lot of effort that goes into actually marketing them. And I think that's why I think for the future films, I would love to have great partnerships if I find, you know, some proper producers who have like marketing and everything behind, because it's been mostly trying to send them to festivals. And I've done it on my own for the first two films. I've tried to find a collaboration with a company that does it for this third one, because I was hoping that that would give me more credibility and they would also know how to navigate the festival circles. But unfortunately, it was a very bad experience. Like, they did not do the film justice, and I had to pull out the film in the end. So I have to say, yeah, for Springendo, for instance, I haven't done much myself as I did with the other films, but I'm also, I think, not the best marketer for it. So mostly it's like people coming to me. I think Rosemary, you came to me, for example, and that how this came about. Or when I was at Pentertainment, some people would come to Pentertainment, discover my films, and then we would do something together. So I think there's more potential there, but I feel like I don't have, yeah, I'm just not a good, I think, a vendor or seller of my own work, but I'm always happy when people discover it and find joy in it and spread it. So yeah.
You mentioned Panthertainment, and you say when you were with that organization. So evidently you're not working with them now, but you are or have been working on the series about Sam Mithira. So what is imminently next for you? Where should we be looking for you next?
That's a good question, because I'm kind of on pause a little bit, because like after I worked for Entertainment, I worked on the Sam Mithira project, and I wasn't sure if I can be part of the shoot or not, and I got hired to work on something for Netflix at the moment. So that's kind of where I'm at right now, which is obviously great, and I, you know, like it's great work, and I love all I'm discovering, but that doesn't give me much time to work on my own project right now. So I think at Entertainment I still had some time for my own stuff. Right now I don't, so I'm not quite sure actually when is next. Like there will be stuff coming out that I worked on, like Sam, like the series I'm working on right now for Netflix. But as for my own kind of, you know, my own penmanship, That might take some time, but I have a couple of ideas for feature films. I have one that I was working on with Entertainment also, that we were looking for collaborations, and that's something I'm still very much pursuing. So right now I'm kind of pausing to discover the world of Netflix, and when that is done, I will go back to hopefully, I mean, not hopefully, definitely finishing the series and finishing my next short. So that's definitely one coming next. It's already written. So it's just a question of COVID actually coming in between, that I couldn't shoot it for the last 2 years. And yeah, hopefully as soon as possible, I will finish that and go on about doing my first feature film.
Do you think that the experience with Netflix will make it easier for you to get the funding and support that you need to do your feature film?
Definitely, because I really realize I'm at I mean, that's the sad and funny thing. It's all about connections. It's all about who you know. And I think one of the big question marks I had in my head when I took this position was like, okay, it sounds great, but also it's not what I really want to do. But then I also realized, obviously, I will have a platform that enables me to kind of show what I can do to a lot of people who are in power, you know, and that will enable me to have it much easier later when I want to do my own things. And that's something I realized also starting there, is that how many times, and I think that's probably an experience that many people of color have, especially women of color, is that how many times you have to prove that you're good to so many people before you get, you know, say, whereas somebody else maybe with more privilege might have to do it just once and just, you know, skyrocket their way somewhere else. So I'm aware of that, you know, but at the same time, right now I'm enjoying what I'm doing there, because it's also really interesting. Like, I can learn so much from projects at a much higher level than what I ever worked on before, which is also great learning. I can help make those projects great. And at the same time, I can take those learnings for myself. I can kind of accelerate my own learning journey, and obviously, hopefully have some great allies, you know, find some great allies on the way with whom I can collaborate in the future.
Well, we're coming to a close now. Are there any final words that you'd like to leave us with? Or do you have a website, or are you on Instagram, a place where others can find you that might be interested in booking you for their classes or films?
Yes. I think I have my Vimeo, which is like Vimeo/Ekale, which is my middle name. And Instagram, I'm Denise, so it's pretty easy to find. And yeah, I mean, I'm not publishing that much right now because I don't like taking selfies, and I think that's not good when you're on Instagram. But yeah, that is definitely somewhere people can find me. So either Vimeo or Instagram. And I always enjoy talking to people about films and just these discussions. And as I said, I really have this love of seeing what other people find in the films and how it connects to them, how it touches them. So yeah, be sure to watch more, reach out. And I'm definitely always interested in conversations about film.
So now, in closing, and on behalf of the BGHRA, I'd like to express my sincere appreciation to Denise Ekale Kum, Dr. Emily Fraser-Rath, and our students. Importantly, we are all grateful to Davidson College for making this and so many important conversations possible. Today's recording will soon be uploaded to our YouTube channel at Black Germans. Our recent conference recordings will also be posted in the coming days, so subscribe so that you will be notified as each new recording is added. Visit our website at bghra.org and follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Eventbrite for details about upcoming events starting next week. We hope that you've enjoyed today's conversation with Denise as much as we have, and until next time, we thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you.